In 2024, Crystal Dynamics announced a Unified Lara Croft, a version of the character that combines all the iterations that have come before her, but I say that's an impossible task. In this video, we'll break down who the three Lara Crofts we've seen in-game are, why they're fundamentally incompatible, and whether this unified version is simply another reboot of the character. A spoiler warning before we begin: this conversation is only possible by discussing major spoilers for practically every Tomb Raider game, especially Legend onwards. Proceed with caution. Referring to three versions of the same character can get confusing, so rather than calling them all Lara, I'll be using the following terms. Core. This is the Lara Croft featured in the original 6 Tomb Raider games, those being Tomb Raiders 1, 2, 3, The Last Revelation, Chronicles, and The Angel of Darkness. She takes her name from the developer of those titles, Core Design. Legend. This Lara stars in Crystal Dynamics' first reboot of the franchise. She leads Tomb Raider Legend, Anniversary, and Underworld. A lot of fans call this LAU Lara, but that proved awkward to say multiple times through a script, so Legend it is. Survivor. Our most recent Lara Croft. This iteration of the characters from the trilogy of Tomb Raider 2013, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, a set of names that frustratingly ruins my alphabetized gaming shelf. For the sake of simplicity, I'm only looking at the 3 Laras presented in the mainline games. I'm just going to briefly note that there are other Laras. 2 Laras came to the big screen, played by Angelina Jolie and Alicia Vikander. Then there's Top Cow Lara from the comics. We also have spin-off, handheld, and mobile games that might be considered as different incarnations of the character. Let's spend some time getting to know each Lara by comparing some of their key characteristics. There are a few categories we'll be looking at, and just hearing this list might clue some of you into why I'm focusing on these attributes. They are her parents, her mentors, and her key motivations. Sadly, Lara's parents play a significant role in defining her, with only one version of the character escaping her ties to her family. Core Lara was born to Lord Henchingley Croft and his wife, simply referred to as Lady Croft. They don't explicitly appear in the games or play important roles in the narrative. The fanbase commonly assumes an older couple briefly seen at Lara's funeral to be her very much still alive parents, but that is speculation. It's only from the first game's manual that we learn Lara's parents disapproved of her lifestyle and career path, choosing to disinherit her. This Lara instead received Croft Manor from her great aunt. Legend Lara's parents faced a different fate. When Lara was a little girl, she and her mother Amelia were in a plane crash. They survived and came across an ancient temple where, in an attempt to protect her daughter, Amelia pulls a sword from a stone and disappears. Somehow, an unsupervised 9-year-old Lara then made it back to civilization following a 10-day hike to Kathmandu. Legend's father, Richard Croft, was an archaeologist who was heartbroken by his wife's disappearance. He became obsessed with finding Amelia, sadly dying during an expedition before he got definitive answers. Lara later learns that Richard was killed by recurring series antagonist, Natla. Finally, we have Survivor Lara. In this timeline, there are no mysteries surrounding Amelia. She died in a plane crash and her body resides in the Croft family crypt. Richard, meanwhile, was still an archaeologist and, similar to his Legend counterpart, couldn't accept losing Amelia. He tried to find a way to resurrect her. He was also murdered, but this time it was by Trinity in his own home, with them setting up the scene to look like he took his own life. It was a young Lara who discovered her father's body. Straight away, those are 3 very different and incompatible lineages. Despite some surface-level similarities, Lara's background varies wildly between the 3 continuities. That's important, as these events would shape the person she became. Now let's look at her teachers. Core Lara was mentored by Werner von Croy. The Last Revelation's opening levels show a 16-year-old Lara exploring a Cambodian temple with him, with von Croy's guidance acting as a rather intrusive and condescending set of gameplay tutorials. Legend Lara doesn't have an explicitly named or featured mentor figure. However, she does refer to her dad's journals and is said to be following in his footsteps. We know that she accompanied Richard on some of his expeditions, presumably learning the ropes from him. Lara certainly seems to look up to and admire her old man in this timeline, helping him fit that mentor role. Survivor Lara had Comrade Roth as both a mentor and her godfather. This Lara's first expedition was the ill-fated trip to Yamatai, an island within the Dragon's Triangle. Here, the dire circumstances would force Lara to rapidly master the ability she needed to become the Tomb Raider we now know. It's very much her origin story. Sadly, Roth dies during the game's events. Now, this is contradicted by the Netflix series, which shows a very capable Lara working alongside Roth in Chile. This could have only happened before Yamatai, so it's strange that Lara's this competent. But again, we're focusing on the content presented to us in the main games. That's because this animated series and the supposedly canon Dark Horse comics can cause more problems and pose more questions than they solve. Again, we see significant differences between not only who taught Lara, but what they taught her and when she debuted. These differing teachers and formative experiences instilled varying skills, values, and methodologies in these Laras. As a result, they all go about things a bit differently. Let's discuss why Lara does what she does. Core Lara is described as a thrill-seeker. She directly tells Natla that she only plays for sport. Game manuals tell us she got a taste for adrenaline and adventure after surviving a plane crash aged 21, but the last revelation and chronicles would later contradict this by showing her having adventures at just 16 years old. She's driven by her own self-determination and sense of curiosity, in spite of her parents' disapproval. Legend Lara is explicitly searching for her mother, getting very emotional at the end of Tomb Raider Legend while demanding answers from that game's villain, Amanda. She eventually finds what little is left of Amelia as a shell stumbling around Helheim. Lara sorrowfully shoots what was once her mother, ending her suffering and misery in an act of mercy. Survivor Lara is initially trying to get herself and her friends off Yamatai and back home in one piece. Once she returns, her focus shifts to uncovering the truth behind her father's death, seeking justice against Trinity after learning they were responsible. By the end of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Lara seems to have come to terms with what happened, and now seeks to follow in her father's footsteps to make him proud. While Lara's parents are the driving force of her adventures in both the Legend and Survivor era, Core Lara is the polar opposite. She's estranged from her still-living parents, and that appears to suit her just fine. It's never brought up, referenced, or discussed in-game, merely existing as flavor text in a manual. There are other minor differences, such as their supporting casts, choice of weaponry, and especially their first kills. We could be here all day if we pointed out every inconsistency. What is clear is that these are three very different characters who go on these adventures for vastly different reasons, and who approach their tasks in different ways. So is that it? Case closed? A unified Lara can never happen, and these new games must feature a brand new Lara that we've never seen before? To answer that, I want to explore what we know about Tomb Raider Legacy of Atlantis and Tomb Raider Catalyst, the new games releasing in 2026 and 2027 respectively. If you're watching from the future, let me know how well this section aged. Let's start with the trailer for Tomb Raider Catalyst, where we hear the line, "You survived the Dragon's Triangle." This is a direct reference to Yamatai, an adventure we've only seen Survivor Lara go on, indicating that this might be a continuation of the Survivor timeline. Now, there's nothing to say that Core Lara or Legend Lara couldn't have experienced a version of Yamatai, but if that's the case, Core Lara would have been much more experienced due to her younger start, having an easier time. Meanwhile, Legend Lara wouldn't have reacted so viscerally to killing Larson in Tomb Raider Anniversary, as she would have already taken her first lives a long time ago on Yamatai. You might be thinking there's a problem. You survived the Dragon's Triangle is immediately followed by Cross the Threshold to Atlantis. We've never seen Survivor Lara go on this journey, however, we have seen her get invited. In the original ending of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Survivor Lara receives a letter from Natla, the antagonist of the Atlantis arc, presumably inviting her to search for the Scion. This ending was removed in a day one patch though, with its replacement making no mention of Natla, the Scion, or Atlantis. It was seemingly a tease for the next entry that got walked back at the very last second. Tomb Raider: Legacy of Atlantis might be that follow-up. It will depict Lara's search for the Scion for a third time, the original 1996 Tomb Raider being Core Lara's version of events, and Tomb Raider Anniversary being Legend Lara's take. Maybe we're retroactively acknowledging and finally following up on Shadow of the Tomb Raider's ending. After all, in the trailer for Legacy, Lara is wearing the Jade Pendant, an accessory unique to Survivor Lara that appears in all her games. That same pendant can be glimpsed in the trailer for Catalyst, which features an older and more experienced Lara. If I had to guess, I would say she's intended to be in her late 30s to early 40s. Given that the trailer also includes the bow, Survivor Lara's signature weapon, the evidence is starting to stack up. For a moment, I thought I had solved it. This isn't a new Unified Lara, this is just continuing the story of Survivor Lara. But then I became aware of an interview with game director Will Kerslake. He told Games Radar, from a timeline perspective, Tomb Raider Catalyst is set years after the events of Tomb Raider Underworld, with the reboot trilogy serving as her origin story, so we're seeing a more experienced Lara Croft. If we take that explicitly word for word, without room for nuance or interpretation, everything falls apart. Full disclaimer, as someone with a formal diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, I am guilty of those exact, uncompromising readings. My initial response was therefore quite absolute. We firmly established that the Legend and Survivor Laras are two different characters, so how can Catalyst be set after both the Survivor trilogy and Underworld? Underworld capped off a trilogy where Lara was looking for her missing mother. She likely wouldn't have gone on that adventure, wouldn't have been in Helheim without that motivation. Survivor Lara knows her mum is dead, she has her body, there's no mystery surrounding it. It also invites another problem. The game released immediately before Underworld was Anniversary, a retelling of Lara's adventures in Atlantis and fight against Natla. That was done specifically so Natla could return and play a major role in Underworld. The game releasing immediately before Catalyst is Legacy of Atlantis, another retelling of Lara's adventures in Atlantis and fight against Natla. It means we'll have two canonical yet potentially conflicting versions of that adventure for this version of the character. It raises tons of other questions too, such as which depiction of Richard's death holds true. Was it at home at the hands of Trinity, or in Cambodia at the hands of Natla? Was Lara horrified by killing another person for the first time on Yamatai, or was Larson her first kill? There are too many things that don't line up. Surely this has to be a new thought for Lara, yet another reboot. On a 17th reading of Kerslake's quote, "Knowing myself, appreciating that what people say and mean aren't always the same thing, and allowing for nuance, I'm hoping Will merely misspoke, or was using Underworld as a reference for Lara's age and experience, rather than explicitly saying that game's events took place for Survivor Lara." There's another important line in Catalyst's trailer that clues us in. "I've heard a dozen tall tales that say you're unstoppable." It's probably no coincidence that 1. There have been 12 mainline Tomb Raider games, aka a dozen, and 2. Tall tales is a term used for incredible stories that people suspect have been exaggerated. This could lead to this Lara having been on a vague version of past events where we're asked not to sweat the details. The writers might focus on commonalities. For example, while Core was in a plane crash solo aged 21, Legend was 9 years old and accompanied by her mother, while Survivor wasn't on the plane, instead her mother was. All three feature a life-defining plane crash in the Himalayas. I could see the creative team taking a James Bond approach, where, with the exception of the Craig era, each adventure is considered as a standalone story. Only minor elements cross over and there's a lack of established lore or a timeline, with Bond's scarce examples including Blofeld's multiple appearances and infrequent references back to Tracy's death. It might be too late for that. The Core Design games are already set up like Bond movies. Tomb Raiders 1, 2 and 3 were entirely independent from each other. It's true Chronicles is set at Lara's funeral following the last Revelation's ending, but its episodic nature, framed as mourners sharing stories about Lara's life, makes it feel more like an optional epilogue. Bar featuring Werner, Angel of Darkness then seems to ignore the last Revelation, featuring a very much alive and well Lara with no explanation as to how she survived. The difficulty is that both the Legend and Survivor trilogies were deeply concerned with continuity. They both expect you to play all three of their entries. It's much harder to jump in at their second or third game. The developers can't ask us to care about two sets of established lore and timelines, to then follow it up with, "Don't worry about it, just enjoy the ride." That genie is out of the bottle and isn't going back in. We'll likely get answers once the games are out, and you can be sure I'll make follow-up videos at that time. For now, I'm going to hope that Will misspoke and assume this is a continuation of the Survivor timeline because unification is simply impossible. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. There are likely things I've missed, and I'd love to continue discussing this particular rabbit hole with people just as obsessed and overthinking it as I am.